computers prolifically, and this is probably the conscious use of tools of technology as never before. Technology has, through the millennia and history of mankind, been a transformative and pervasive enabler, touching every aspect of human existence. From being used to support life and livelihood, to applications in agriculture, revolutionizing industry, and tertiary services. I think its use in education and healthcare has been remarkable for progress of individuals and society. From being an enabler on account of its multiple and multifarious applications, technology has now become a disruptor in many ways, sometimes for the good, helping us to leapfrog to higher and higher degrees of success and advancement. The misuse or wrongful use has been destructive. It is against this background that the global community has to come together. Now, before I launch into the discussion itself, I just thought I'll make these few opening remarks and then follow it up with a little brief on why the GCTC.
Aditya, there's no audio right now.
Okay, is it fine now?
No, I can hear your voice, but I can't hear Mr. Krishna.
Sorry, I suppose Krishan Varma is out of the network. Anyways, I would like to let you know that about GCTC. GCTC is a think tank, just come into inception just 3.5 years back. We at GCTC, it's an international level think tank, and we're working on various policy domains on counterterrorism and national security. And today we are here, and we have already done close to 20 plus national and international level conferences. We at GCTC have recently started this domain of GCTC MANTHAN, and we hope that we would be continuing this. We now start with our proceedings with the comments. We'll start with the initial comments from Major General BIPIN BAKSHI. General BIPIN BAKSHI, please.
Okay. Okay, can you see me?
Request others to kindly mute their mic, please.
Can you see and hear me, Aditya? Yeah, Aditya, can you see and hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I will just open my presentation then.
Right, sir.
Are you able to see my presentation? Is this visible to you?
So it will be coming very shortly.
Okay. Yeah, so I am presenting. Are you able to see the presentation?
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir.
I think you need to click on the arrow.
I've done a share screen, so you should be able to see it. Not yet?
Yeah.
No,
now,
sir.
I'll come on to the full show. 1 second. No. I'll stop sharing and again do a sharing.
Right, sir.
So I'm again doing present now, present a window, share the content, choose what you'd like to share. Okay. Are you able to see this now? Are you able to see this now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Please open this.
Okay. So you're able to see this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now I'll go on to slideshow and I'll straight away proceed further with this particular presentation. So a very good evening to all of you, and thank you Aditya and the team GCTC for getting me on this talk. But as was mentioned, I've had a fair amount of time and experience in the counterterrorism domain, and the particular tenure in the NSG, it gave me a fair number of ideas about international cooperation. Just a couple of days back, we had a talk on the Indo-Pacific, and we were talking about jointness there. So I'm starting with a quote where the Foreign Affairs Minister, Her Excellency Maris Payne, in the Raisena dialogue just about a year and a half back, had spoken about this kind of cooperation. She had said that a peaceful and open Indian Ocean region is a vital national interest for Australia, just as it is for USA, and so also it may be for India. And she spoke about India being an anchor in the region, and she said that Indian Ocean connects us rather than dividing us. So the point I'm getting at is that the politicians, the world leaders are very clear that we have to have international cooperation so that we can share technology, get a better grip on the situation, whether it pertains to pandemics and whether it pertains to terrorism. Because here, very interestingly, neither do these transnational organizations, the transnational terrorists, and neither does the coronavirus respect any national boundary. Whereas our functioning and our training and our methods are tied down to boundaries. We are even further tied down to organizations. So we need to think about it very clearly that there is a need for better cooperation. The leaders are very clear about it, but it is the security professionals, like some of us here, and the bureaucrats who have to make the cooperation happen in a better manner. I'll just share some of my ideas and my experiences on this. The very first thing is about sharing of intelligence, whether it pertains to the spread of disease, or it is the making of bombs, or it is new techniques in terror. We who are the old school type, we are brought up with the paradigm of need to know. That is, no information is to be given out of a particular department if the other person you feel does not need to know it. We have to now change from need to know to need to share. We are very good at vertical flow of information. We are not good at lateral sharing. Neither are we good at lateral thinking, which we need to develop. But similarly, we need to have a flow of information sideways, lateral sharing. This is also very important. Whereas the terrorists are very agile. They are able to move across boundaries much easier than we are. We have our own problems of our bureaucratic systems, our checks and balances. We cannot adopt new technology at the same pace as the terrorists can. So we need to shorten this curve. We need to make it faster. And one of the ways, of course, is besides sharing intelligence, looking at new modus operandi from one part of the globe, it moves very fast to some other part of the globe. But do the counter-terrorist methods and technologies which we are adopting move with the same speed? We need to catch up a bit. When it comes to terrorist financing, these are issues which have been covered in the concept note. They are able to move their money very fast. So we need to get new technology. We should be able to red flag the wrong move of money. And we have also spoken about how they are able to use the social media very well to propagate their own agenda. We should be able to stop it in some manner. We should be able to flag it faster. We already have Facebook, Twitter are taking down wrong posts, but we need to engage with them probably in a little better manner to have a faster reaction to all these things. We must similarly collaborate in our development of new methods, new technology. I'll talk about some of these things a little later too. Some of the challenges which we all face is we are not very good in night vision. We need to improve our own force protection. We get an equipment, but we are not able to maintain it well. So we need to collaborate. We need cameras with better ranges, change detection. We even have an Israeli company which is talking about mood detection. They are able to scan people who are moving in a bus or a train, and they can make out from the image whether that person is under stress and is likely to plant a bomb or not. So under the skin surveillance is the way we are going, and we need to share information and make this a little better. Of course, for the force protection, we need better materials, better strength, that being lighter. And once we have equipment, we need to have interoperability of batteries, chargers, power sources to make things easy to run. It is quite difficult enough to get the equipment into place. It is more difficult thereafter to maintain it if you're not able to share the technology. We need to have indigenous spares. And we need to have some kind of interoperability. Even 2 days back when the Indo-Pacific was being talked about, the interoperability point came up, and it is people like us and through these kind of forums that we can make interoperability happen. This was one excellent idea where a dog is sent out. You can see there's a Motorola radio strapped on his neck. I just flashed my thing. So from this radio, the handler is giving him a remote instruction into his ear. The goggle which is on him has an excellent camera. There's also a camera behind his head. So when you send this dog ahead, you're actually able to control him, move him, and you can see what he's seeing. So even beyond visual range, you can move the dog. This has applications in counter-terrorism. It has various applications also in other domains. So we need to collaborate. We need to get technology moving in various parts of the globe and then integrate it. To do that, we have a number of forums where we are building capacity of each other. For example, the US has the ATA program, which we are participating in, but that is run by one vertical. Then we have the FBI also partnering with us, that is run in a little different manner. And the third dimension is we have the special forces, like the Delta Force comes in, and their cooperation is again in a different manner. Going similarly, we have recently cooperated with Thailand. So we had an exercise there. Now in Thailand, it is the CTOC, which happens to be working directly under the PM. So the MOU with them had to be run from their NSCS to our NSCS. This was an annual exercise. It went on for 2 years, but thereafter we could not really get the full benefit of this, or I would say we couldn't exploit the full potential because we are ourselves having our own barriers within ourselves. So we need to really integrate and synergize in a better manner. One more example I will just mention to you. Again, 2 days back when we were speaking about the Indo-Pacific, we actually have had the first concrete initiative off the cord. It happened to be a counter-terrorism exercise. It was held in India, in Delhi, at the NIA headquarters. As you can see from this poster, if you can see it, it was 21st, 22nd November. So we are making progress. We need to probably go faster down this lane, have a little better integration than what we already have. And I'm sure we'll be able to benefit from this. So partnerships, alliances, this is the way forward. And not only the security forces, but there are so many other agencies. Now, this is an earlier one. Even before the coronavirus came up into being, we had been talking about improving our own synergy with so many agencies which have to work. It's an all-of-government approach. There's so many departments which have to be integrated within a nation. And the next level is what we are here talking about, integrating with other nations. So it's a long way to go, and we have a lot of ground to cover, and I hope we will keep making progress. And finally, I will talk about what one of our ministers spoke. This was a seminar which we had at Manesar NSG, where our minister said every peace-loving person must contribute towards national security. So if we pull our acts together, I'm sure things will improve and we'll go from strength to strength. Thank you.
Thank you, General BAKSHI, for your talk. I would now request Dr. MS Vijayraghavan. Dr. Raghavan, please. I would request the audience to come up with their questions. They can write and their questions on the chat box, please. Thank you.
Very good evening to all of you.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening to all of you, and thank GCTC and in particular Aditya for giving me an opportunity to share some of my thoughts from my experiences in, to begin with, in DRDO, then later in societies manufacturing semiconductor devices, and subsequently in another society which has been set up when Dr. Kalam was the principal scientific advisor, which is to integrate the governmental thinking with industry's ability to meet the challenges which the government intelligence agencies keep coming up very often. And finally with in PMO and NTRO. I had the privilege to read the gist of what we are going to be discussing today. And I find there are 5 issues that we are grappled with. One is policy solutions to today's open technology resolution, followed by considerations on why certain lethal technologies spread. And third would be to explore how the latest off-the-shelf technologies might be adapted for malevolent ends. And the fourth is what the counterterrorism policy states need to adopt in order to keep pace with new generation of technologically enabled extremism. And finally, how states will deal with the rising anticipation of terrorist attack during the post-COVID-19. So I think I'll go through each one of them. And obviously, due to the time constraints, I will touch upon briefly all these issues. And probably in the course of the further discussions, we'll have plenty of opportunity to expand on those. Before looking at the policy solutions for today's open technology revolution, I think the following facts have to be recognized. The first one is technology of today is aimed at convenience. And you combine it with affordability and ubiquitousness, these technologies transform to being open and accessible to all. With each such technology, there is an associated usage, obviously, which is for both good and bad purposes. To to recall something which all of us are aware of, at least the Indians are aware of. Brahmastra is a very powerful weapon to which both Ravana and Ram had access to. What to talk of less powerful ones. So we have to grapple with this nature of technology, that it can be used for both good and bad purposes, depending on the nature of technology beholder, and accordingly evolve policy. So this is the first stark fact that we have to recognize and factor in. Number two would be the usage of such technologies for malevolent purposes. And they are very favorite among, one, the misguided youths and their groups, two, groups having both state and corporate sponsors, and finally, nation-state actors. These entities use the vulnerability of such technologies to remain untraceable and also anonymous. This is the second fact. And the third one is there are social boundaries to the usage of such technologies, such as privacy, human rights, that are associated with such technologies when used for the human well-being. Such boundaries often are non-existent when used otherwise. This brings in certain degree of asymmetry between good and bad usage of legitimate technologies, with bad users often at an advantageous position. This is the third fact that we need to recognize. So based on this, we need to look at policy solutions. As you all know, nature loves to always create pairs of opposites. In this instance, such open technologies are available to all and can be put to both good and bad use. Any policy, in my opinion, that we intend to initiate must be in accordance with this natural phenomenon. Hence, we must recognize and address these three realities while evolving policy solutions. In particular, recognition of asymmetric nature of issues linked to adoption of such technologies have to be additionally focused while synthesizing solutions. And let me move to the issue number 2, which is consider why certain lethal technologies spread. In my opinion, adoption and diffusion of technologies depend on multiple factors, prominent among them being convenience, affordability, ease of usage, availability, easy operability, and ability to be easily weaponized. For example, 3D printing guns and armed inexpensive drones of various kinds are ones that have already found their way into the hands of bad guys. I think you are all aware the 3D gun was used in the recent German synagogue shooting, I think sometime in October, November, if I remember right, last year. This bears a testimony to what I am telling. Similarly, biological or germ warfare are waiting in the wings, enthused by devastation let loose by pandemics like COVID-19, Ebola, and similar viruses. So therefore, the game gets complicated when these rogue elements in possession of these lethal technologies are supported by state players. So this is the issue number 2, which we need to be focusing on. Issue 3, explore how the latest off-the-shelf technologies might be adapted for malevolent ends. See, it's my personal observation that both good and bad guys look up to natural processes to improve their arsenal in order to achieve their respective objectives. I distinctly recall bringing together more than 2 decades ago the Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics and National Institute of Immunology for developing a biological system inspired network defense for protecting computer networks. Similar collaborations can happen with bad guys too. As my previous speaker said, they collaborate much more than the good guys. When good guys develop technologies to defend networks, bad guys develop viruses and other malwares to disrupt such networks. If you go a little deeper into the characteristics and behavior of both types of viruses, that is the biological and the computer viruses, the comparison is absolutely frightening. At least to me, it is very frightening. Both behave the same way, including information coding for parasitic behavior inside a host system. Take, for example, the popular denial of service, that is DOS attack, and compare it with HIV. At the least, both begin by overloading a computer or a human system. HIV attacks the immune system, making humans more vulnerable.
Aditya, are you able to hear?
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So can I go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At the least, both begin by overloading a computer or a human system, depending on what virus it is, it's a biological or a computer. HIV attacks the immune system, making humans more vulnerable in certain diseases and vaccination that much difficult. Computer viruses such as Sality, I think all of you heard about Sality. So quite old, must be about more than 15 years back. This was in circulation. Sality uses this strategy, terminating antivirus programs and setting up a malicious program as an authorized application to bypass Microsoft firewall. Despite such striking similarities, there are differences between biological and computer viruses. Biological viruses cannot implement techniques comparable with encryption and anti-debugging tricks, at least not now, which their computer counterparts certainly can. This is fortunate because otherwise drugs would have severe problems eliminating such virus variations, and also the mutations. Now look at technologies such as IoT, IoE, now Internet of Everything, robotics, machine learning based analytics. No doubt they are contributing substantially to scale up manufacturing while addressing human comforts and productivity. But increasing complexity of malware, together with social engineering tools, is a very great threat to technology-led economic activities. The world is currently witness to cyber attacks of increasing magnitude, threatening laws and destruction. In the midst of such developments, we see currently cyber physical systems, CPS, being extensively deployed. What are these cyber physical systems? They are integration of computation, networking, and physical processes. Together with IoT that connects objects and machines, an entire array of interconnected entities are available for furthering economic activities. Fine, so far so good. Technologies are working on extending this IoT CPS system to include biological processes. One of my good friends, Professor Shastri from Stanford, some time back he has sent me a write-up on what he is trying to do in a new area called cyber biophysical systems, where as a first step he has successfully implemented at the lab level, of course, a system that improves dexterity in minimally invasive surgery, combining cyber-human sensing with surgical robotics. So the cyber biophysical systems would no doubt herald the successful integration of the physical and virtual worlds, and such advancements progress in the name of transforming healthcare. But progress on this front is not without a cost. It would open a large opportunity for malware writers to develop new and complex viruses that can threaten human existence. I call such malware as biomalware. These malwares, for example, developed even for altering the code of DNA, can result in pandemics of the kind where even prophylactic actions would be impossible, leave alone the cure. So we need to factor in these things also. Now the other two issues are essentially pertaining to the counterterrorism. How do we deal with that at the state level? And what do we need to adopt in order to keep pace with new generation of technologically enabled extremism? Again, I come back to the problem one where we need to factor in the asymmetric usage of such technologies that are freely available and accessible to everybody, both the good and bad guys. And similarly, how states will deal with the rising anticipation of terrorist attack during and post-COVID-19 situations. Terrorists or bad elements now already is aware that what such pandemics can do. Assuming such viruses or the biological malwares, if they are accessible to the bad elements, the havoc that they can let loose is for anybody to guess. So at this stage, I would stop what I am wanting to present, and I would be keen to listen to others. And maybe when there is an opportunity, I'll be able to contribute further and respond. Thank you, Aditya, and thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Vijayraghavan. I would now proceed and Brand Waltzman. Brand.
Oh, I only heard about this yesterday, so I'm not really ready to make any speech. I'm sorry. I'll be happy to respond to a discussion later.
Mute. Kindly mute.
What?
Yeah, sure, sir. Please start, sir.
No, I say I only heard about this yesterday, so I don't have anything prepared. So
And your voice
and
is
wait.
cracking. Your voice is cracking. And I will request if you can come on the camera, please.
I can speak later when the discussion comes. I pass at the moment.
Okay. Then we can proceed with John, Professor John Nomikos. Professor John. I guess we have missed him.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, now better. Yeah, welcome.
No?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
Okay, now better. Okay, let me go a little bit faster because I'm far away here in Athens, and I'm afraid not to be disconnected again. First of all, I heard, as much as I can, I will be a little bit faster in order to elaborate on my way of thinking, my critical way of thinking. First of all, I would like to say that my presentation is divided in 3 parts. Number one, technology is priority number one. Of course, without technology, we cannot do a lot of things related to the non-traditional threat as we face today in a coronavirus 19. Number two, we have always to remember that technology, even though it's very important and bridges us today, as we can see, via this meeting we have today, we never forget, the productive role that the human intelligence, is quite important because, the people that we have on the field as an intelligence practitioner or intelligence security officer, they collect information, globally. So human brain, a human practitioner are very, very, very important. From the time of Alexander the Great, that moved from all the way from Greece all the way to India and so on. So to me, human intelligence, #1 priority too. Technology is very important because, bridges transfer the knowledge from one place to another. And #3, look today what we face. We face an invisible threat. This is the pandemic. It might stop tomorrow. It might come tomorrow after, some time. We don't know. But today we have to think, out of the box in a very, very different way that it used to be in the Cold War, in the post-Cold War era. Therefore, what I'm suggesting right now to you, #1, human intelligence, having people, especially, on the India think tank or in the government, they have to collaborate, the private, the second, and the private and the public sector. #1 priority, they have to collaborate. The university and specialized think tank would do, open sources intelligence. #1. #2, like I said, look what's happened today on the Facebook. The Facebook has already made, a website in order to collect information globally, about the coronavirus. If that happens, the private sector is going to be one step ahead of the state authorities. The state authorities has a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of a protocol, and they might be, on the slow level to follow up with the post-pandemic, private sector technological initiation. So what I'm saying right now to you, please pay attention. The technology, whatever you do in India, in Europe, whatever we do, it has to be like a connection to us, but there is no way that algorithm or, technological advances can, replace the human brain, the human intelligence. No way. That comes from the biblical era until now. And what we learned, we use the brain, to collect, analyze, and disseminate information. And then we use advanced technology to join each other. How am I here? Am I here based in Athens, Greece? Look, all of you. Why? Because of the technology. But do you know what I have on my brain? No. No one knows exactly what I'm thinking. Do we know what the terrorists or the extremist people they have in the brain? No, we don't. But the access we have in the technology, like Mr. I don't know how to pronounce the name, the last previous, the Honorable Mr. Vijayraghavan, if I say right, he said, that everyone has access to technology. Yes, everyone who has money, it doesn't matter if they are state authority, public authority, private authority, non-state actor, if it could be any kind of radical network, any kind of extreme network, any kind of organized crime, transnational crime. Do they have the money? Yes. They can have access to technology. We have it. But what we need to do is to be in front of them. How we can be in front of them? To collect information. How we collect information? By having human intelligence practitioners and the field, because we don't want them to be one level in front of us. And now what's happening in the pandemic is going to be repeated, in the near future. So what we need to do is to create a human intelligence sharing platform coming from India to all the way to Europe, all the way to the Middle East, all the way to the United States, Latin America, everywhere, in order to to collect, analyze, and disseminate information we have in our brain in order to be able to prevent invisible terrorist, non-traditional threat like the virus, like the pandemic, because now it's quite difficult to know what's coming next. And yesterday I had the opportunity, to make a presentation with another, scholars in Africa, and I was quite surprised to find out that the virus, the coronavirus, in Sahara, in North Africa, is spreading out. And one of the speakers there, they were talking about that, it's much easier from Africa to move everywhere, even in Europe, even in West Asia. What I want to tell you right now, number one, human intelligence and the field, collect information. Number two, use the technology for our advantage, knowing that the terrorist network have the same, capacity to use, the technology, but not the human practitioner we have. And number three, I want to say a global human intelligence sharing platform having a database in India, because India is the only democratic state in West Asia compared with the other state there. And now I'm just completing my first presentation. So I'm telling you right now, as a security professional, telling you the fact. Right now, the European Union is in disaster. Because there are 28 member states acting unilaterally without any kind of information. Therefore, the problem we face now in Europe is very, very serious, because we don't know what's going on after the pandemic, and the European Commission is more or less an economic union, but a security or the military union. So Europe is not going to be as you know today. It's going to be different. The United States, Canada, Latin America, all these states, need, to be transformed. In other words, they need to reform the security and intelligence community in order to be able to adjust to the new changes as it is today. So give priority to a human intelligence sharing platform, create a database in India, and from India, explore, the technology. I'm very sure that the best statistics and mathematicians are coming from India. So take the initiative to have this platform spread out in, in the rest of the world, and create and collaborate with specialized research institute who do study an open source intelligence. And the last one I want to tell you, please, try to focus on regional networks, like in Europe, the Scandinavia, the Mediterranean, the Balkan, the UK, so on. Do the same in India. It's a huge country, it's a beautiful country, but distribute regional network and create, a data network to collect information. But the most important thing, connect human practitioners with each other through a research foundation. Because like I said, state authorities are doing a very good job, but sometimes because of the bureaucracies and because, of the protocol they have to follow, they are slowly to adjust to the new situation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Professor. Thanks. Thank you so much, Professor. I would now request Dr. Nirmaljeet Singh Kalsi to share his comments, opening comments, please. Dr. Kalsi.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to make a small presentation. All of you have already gone through the paper which was circulated, and I would make some initial points. Now, we are all aware that cyberspace and emerging technologies, they are facilitating terrorist activities at an unprecedented scale, reach, and anonymity. Mostly the internet technologies now, these are being used for strategic communication, propaganda, brainwashing, effective recruitment, training, financing of the activities, incitement to commit acts of crime and acts of terrorism, gathering and disseminating data for the crime purposes. Now, technology has also allowed terrorists to find new audiences in new ways, new places. Now, in the paper, we talked about the possible scenarios of use of technology by the terrorist organizations. And the paper proves in more than one ways for the printing, or whether it is unmanned aircraft of Mujahideen unit which has been created in Iraq. Similarly, the use of technologies for transfer of funds, for stealing money, for launching cyber attacks. Now, all of these are proven activities. So these scenarios are not only possible, but they seem to align with the motives and incentives of the terrorist groups. Now, there are new technologies which are also giving us aid to fight global terrorism and pandemics. Now, the same technologies which are being used by the terrorists, we even have better access to those technologies, and we'll be able to use these technologies to fight the terrorism and pandemics. Last September 2019, United Nations Office of Counter-Terrorism, it held a conference on countering terrorism through innovative approaches and the use of new and emerging technologies. And the conclusion was very encouraging. The conclusion was that we are, though, in a fight with the terrorists on the use of the technologies, but we are also using technology very effectively. We are countering the terrorist operations with lightning speed. The internet content of terrorists is detected and deleted faster than ever before. Similarly, use of cyber computing, use of artificial intelligence, and accelerated information processing, we are able to trace and predict the terrorist attacks. So it is therefore necessary to increase the exchange of expert knowledge and global collaboration on technologies to help better identification and responding to risks before it is too late for all of us. Now, talking about the global cooperation to face global terrorism challenges. Now, we are aware that most of the countries today, they have some kind of capability. They are using AI and global surveillance, AI for global surveillance. 75 out of 176 countries globally use AI technologies for surveillance and intelligence purposes. Similarly, to curb this kind of terrorism, it is critical to boost security intelligence cooperation amongst various nations. Also, considering global scale of terror activities, including funding, training, use of social media, radicalization, recruitment, there is an urgent need for global response by all of us together. And therefore, there is an urgent need to go in for this debate. Now, what I'm trying to propose, what I'm proposing here is some kind of a global technology collaboration platform. I call it GTCP. Now, this global technology platform is proposed as a basic framework for leveraging the use of new and innovative technologies for combating the global issues. And these issues are similar, whether it is terrorism or it is pandemics. It could be any other kind of issues as well. And this platform is being proposed just like as a service, counter-terrorism technology as a service. Now, the platform to be built by and under the aegis of the nation states or the governments. And there are a number of partners. And these partners, as some of the speakers have rightly pointed out, academic institutions of excellence, academic research and development organizations, private sector, global technology companies, entrepreneurs and investors. Similarly, for even better ideas, new technology startups, and especially the startup ecosystem, which is really flourishing in India. And then sub-technology platforms of specialized technologies. For example, the neural networks, including machine learning and artificial intelligence, trained on a big set of databases, data analytics, business intelligence, financial intelligence. Similarly, big data analytics for predictions right predictions. And very importantly, social media analytics, sentiment analysis, online behavior analysis. So these are some of the sub-technology platforms which I'm talking about. Now, financing model could be that the private sector, entrepreneurs and investors, they would put in money into this global technology collaboration platform. And the revenue model could be that the government and the government agencies, they pay for, use it as a service, CTT as a service, pay as you use. The initial investment, of course, will be by the private sector. And the user states are going to benefit along with the LEAs, along with the state police, and ultimate beneficiary is going to be the citizen of every country, that is global citizen. Now, the technologies and cyber tech capabilities for combating terrorism, which I see, I've listed number of technologies: artificial intelligence and machine learning, blockchain technologies, virtual agents, chatbots, robotics, then AI robotics and automation, mobility and endpoints, location and presence, then tech intelligence, surveillance, interception, anti-espionage technologies, unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, autonomous vehicles, cyber security, cyber offensive, information security, then digital forensics, cryptography, encryption, decryption, then IoT, IoE, wireless and networking technologies, and then identity management, biometrics, data science, big data, smart devices, cloud computing, and next generation computing, including quantum computing. Similar technologies are going to work for managing any kind of pandemics. In fact, Israel was the first country to use the technologies that deployed for fighting terrorism or fighting this pandemic. The basic framework would be that there are a number of stakeholders. There are user agencies. There are providing organizations which have to provide data. Then private partners and vendors which are providing services, products. Similarly, regulatory bodies are there. There are legal provisions, regulatory provisions in every country. There are governance bodies. And ultimately, the citizen, business, and the economy, they are the beneficiaries. Now, this I'm proposing as a technology platform. That means they will not be the owner of the data. They are basically the processor of that data. Now, if I talk about the key stakeholders, then there are action agencies, I would call them, user agencies or action agencies. And these agencies are common across most of the countries: external intelligence agencies, internal intelligence agencies, anti-corruption agencies, counter-terrorism agencies, state police, then financial intelligence, revenue intelligence, then anti-money laundering agencies, enforcement agencies, NCB, border control, tax and customs and all that. And similarly, the data source could be provided by social media companies like Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Apple, Twitter, then transport and travel companies, Uber, Ola, railways, taxis, airlines, telecom companies and internet service provider, then space aggregator like BNB, Airbnb and Oyo, e-commerce companies, Amazon, eBay, Flipkart, Snapdeal. Similarly, user agencies and government sector agencies, immigration, vehicle registration, driving licenses, banks and financial services, and similarly the entire financial sector. So these are the people who are going to provide data. And now what this data will ultimately do. So the next slide, I've tried to explain the sub-technology platforms which I'm talking about. So these are neural networks which are trained on machine learning and AI using huge set of data from various sources. And these data could be about the event, action, disaster details, date, times, places, addresses, vehicles. Now, there is a software which was developed by the US, still in use, Palantir, that had some of the components of what I'm talking about. But then the Palantir could be expanded to add whatever data is available in the open source, whatever data is available from the private sector. And the same data can then be analyzed to reach at various conclusions and to find and predict various terrorist activities. Now, various services which you could think of: secured communication and collaboration platform, secured office communication collaboration, data analytics, then social media analytics, sentiment analysis, online behavior analysis, prediction of targets, dates, modus operandi, neural network based engines. You could provide those engines, and then tracking as a service, tracking of a person, of a terrorist, of a vehicle, of a weapon, of explosive, so on and so forth. And then penetrating and managing the rogue information networks, penetrating into their networks and then gathering information. And then most importantly, they are using this antidote to crimeware as a service used by the criminals. So this will have to be broken. This will have to be broken. Now, in the end, I would say that the convergence of terrorism and technology is real, to which the state have struggled to respond. There is an urgency and need for global response to counter the use of technology by the terrorists. Then global cooperation is the need of the hour to face global terrorism challenges. Then new technologies are the powerful tool in the fight against terrorism and pandemics. It is necessary to increase the exchange of expert knowledge and ensure global cooperation and collaboration on technologies. And lastly, let us now take the next step towards discussing the need, framework, and modalities for setting up such a global technology collaboration platform. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great, Dr. Kalsi. Every presentation. I hope we would be having many questions. We will finish with the first round, then we will go with the audience questions, right?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. I would not now request Mr. Shiv Sahai. Shiv Sahai, please. Shiv Sahai is an Additional Secretary, NSCS, Prime Minister's Office. Welcome, sir. Shiv Sahai, please. I guess there would be some technical glitch. In the meantime, I would request Dr. Sumaiya Shaikh. Dr. Sumaiya Shaikh, please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Aditya and GCTC for organizing this.
5 to 6 minutes to share your views and presentation. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sure. I would like to share my screen, actually, and hopefully show you a small presentation. I'm just trying to do that. Can you guys see this?
Yeah, you have to click on the present now option for presenting the slide. Yeah.
Can you see the slide? Can you see the slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So, hello everyone. I am in Sweden. I am slightly different in terms of the research area in comparison to all the other people here. That's why I just wanted to put a little perspective out there. I am a neuroscientist. I work in psychiatry and neuroscience, research in the brain, specifically focusing on violent extremism, violent behavior in particular related to extremism. And I'm also part of the task force developed by International Fact-Checking Network and Google for scientific misinformation on COVID. So it's very interesting how the times of COVID and extremism have kind of overlapped, so much so that the extremists are really focusing on how to utilize this period, this very unique period of our life where everybody's really focused on COVID. Our resources, our time, our energy is focused on COVID, while the extremists can actually utilize that time to not just recruit, but also spread some of the acts of violence on the target populations. So recently, Business Insider, Yahoo News, and The Time reported how there was a response from the white supremacists in the US on what to do in the times of COVID. And the response was related, somewhat focusing on how it's their obligation to spread the virus, specifically if they had, or any of the members had this virus. Things like leaving saliva on door handles and things like that. But we don't know that this has happened, but this is just what, there's a brief intelligence from the DHS that kind of communicated this. So this has been happening in other cases too. There has been more recruitment going on platforms such as Telegram by the jihadists as well, while everyone's focusing there. I mean, Telegram said that they've been taking down content that specifically promotes violence or highlights violence in a good way and celebrates it, but that hasn't been done effectively. So everybody, even including the technologists, focused on misinformation on COVID-19, and I think some of these things, which are an ongoing issue in the global security arena, we're missing out on our energies and our focus. So I'll briefly tell you what, why and how the area that I'm working is important and how it relates to everybody else. So we've always known that violent extremism research was focusing on social political sciences, security, intelligence, and of course the military. There's foreign policy, anthropology, history, and of course psychology. Psychology in the last 60 or 70 years in particular, a lot more in the US than anywhere else, but also in Europe, largely focusing following the World War II and the Holocaust, in how the genocide happened and what was behind the psychology of the Nazis. But in the last 5 years, we've really amped up our research in neuroscience, where I come from, and something called biological psychiatry. It's a step up from the regular psychiatry that we do. It's not psychology at all. We use every aspect of the neurobiology or biology of the humans as well as in other species to understand how violent behavior in particular that is largely similar to extremist behavior kind of overlap. What are the mechanisms? So if people say that there are psychological or social or political aspects of violence, there's also biological aspects of violence that people need to consider. And I'll just tell you why. We know that extremism, it's caused by, you know, a lot of the political ideologies and social ideologies. It's in religion or regional, whether it's ethnic or political supremacies. it's just not limited to these areas. However, we have one of the largest extremist organization, ISIS, is focusing on region, political, and religion. There's also an ideology called incels, and I'm not sure how much of you know about these things, but there was a terrorist attack in Canada last year, I think, and multiple after that, and some in the UK and US as well, that focused on gender-related supremacy. And these guys basically were, off on the road engaging in terrorist activities because of their inability to find meaningful relationships in their lives. So, I mean, this is a very new concept that has emerged, and there is an ideology behind it, and there's people all over the world subscribing to these. Men, of course, vowing to be single all their lives, but at the same time, engaging in violent crimes. Now, to strangers on the street, complete strangers. Now, we've actually, we as in our research area, neuroscientists, have focused, mechanisms of, biological violence, or what we call physical aggression, in humans. But we've also seen that as, how typically medicine works. We look at it in different mammals, in primate monkeys. They're a really good example because obviously they're ethologically very closely related with humans, but they also have differences in the way that the humans react. But humans are the only species who engage in violent behavior related to this extremist ideologies. No other animal does what humans do. We're very complex and evolved, but some of the basic cellular, biological, or proteomic mechanisms, they're overlapping, and large amount of them are overlapping. So it's important to go back and forth between different animal models and coming back to human to see why they engage in violence and what drives this type of extremist violence. I work only in humans, just to kind of put it out there, but the research is very vast. Now we've established, from I think 10 years, we've established even our own society. We had a meeting 2 years ago in Paris about extremist violent behaviors and the medicine of it, or the neuroscience of it. We've known that in research of violent extremism or radicalism, it is a spectrum, and only a small proportion of extremists become violent. We know that not everybody who's a radical or an extremist engage in violent crimes. Everybody is a terrorist. For example, there are bus drivers and accountants in ISIS, but they're all terrorists, but they're not all violent extremists. They don't all go and bomb people. I think when they recruit people, very quickly they figure out who would be able to do what, and what sort of conviction each person is driving. So I think they are better in terms of predicting who will become violent later and who will not. And while they can predict, and sometimes they might fail, my research in particular focuses on a scientific way, a biological way to make these predictions, a bit more accurate predictions, and that's using different biological techniques. But more importantly, these radicals, they might be a lot, and only a small proportions of these could be violent offenders. But without these violent offenders or violent extremists, these radicals may become largely redundant. What are they going to do? They're not going to be able to engage in the acts of terrorism that we most despise, right? So and all these other researches that I spoke about, anthropology or history or military, they can all determine or discuss what makes someone an extremist or a radical, but they cannot determine why these extremists or radicals, why only some of them will bomb, shoot, or murder people or become violent. Not everybody can explain that. And I think the answer to that is in the biology.
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, continue.
Okay. So I'm just going to go over the types of different violent behaviors in humans. I think they're very important when we specifically talk about extremist violent behavior, because a lot of the times this has been attributed to some sort of mental health problem. And this is important because psychopathy is often something comes up more than often, and psychopathy is linked with an extreme form of heinous violent crime. But psychopaths, or real psychopaths, are less than 1% of the population. But what we can see around the world, terrorists or violent extremists are not less than 1% of the population. The whole group is like a complex layer of structures, but not everybody is a psychopath. So what is happening? I can hear my own voice. So.
Yes, sir, I would request to kindly mute you.
I can hear my own voice.
Sumaiya. I would request Shiv sir to kindly mute his phone. Continue, please.
So someone's phone is on. Yeah, so there is retaliatory or provoked type of violence, which is the most common ones that people engage in. It's like a tit-for-tat situation. And I'm not saying someone did something 10 years ago and the extremist later retaliates in the next 10 years and says this is provoked. We're saying a defensive type of reactive type of violence where, you know, literally you get off on the road and fly off the handle and start doing something to an individual where the other person has provoked you to do it. Then there is instrumental form of violence, which basically means that you are looking to end this with some sort of a reward, which is in money or power or anything else. But instrumental violence is an instrument to get something out of it. Whereas in the research that we're looking at, it's called appetitive violence. Now it's from appetite as in consumption, food, you know, bon appetit. That's the kind of terminology we're using. And the appetitive violence, why it's similar to the extremist violence, is that it is same rewarding and motivational violence. They're not looking at gaining something in the instrumental way, because the person who's actually engaging in the crime is more likely who's come there just to die, or take a few people and die, and then eventually end up in a really bad place if it's going to be incarcerated. So the motivation here, or the reward here, is the violence itself. And then research has also shown it is very likely to be addictive. A lot of the white supremacists have engaged in this type of behavior, and they say they cannot stop doing it again and again. It's almost addiction. Like the more you do it, the more dopaminergic reward you're going to get out of it. So, and there's an overlap of the brain circuitry with addiction. So addiction research with methamphetamine or cocaine or heroin has shown that the circuitry in the brain, the areas of the brain responsible for addiction, also overlap with the same type of appetitive violent behavior. So it's addictive, it's rewarding, motivational. Whether reward itself is violence, it's feel good and satisfying. Obviously, they feel really good after it. Maybe in the later term, they might regret it eventually. Some don't, some do, but that's not a prerequisite. Of course, I'm going to talk about some of the areas responsible here. The amygdala, premammillary nucleus accumbens, prefrontal cortex in the brain, which is right at the front, which is our most evolved area of the brain, which is largely absent or shrunken in other mammals, and only us humans have the most evolved area of that prefrontal cortex. Now, this is just jargon for a lot of you guys. But these are the areas really responsible in driving that circuitry when we talk about brain research in addiction and this type of extremist type of violence. And just to let you know that how different this type of violence is from other types of violent behaviors, because we're really talking about a driving force, such as an ideology, or even without an ideology, a driving force that gets you to enjoy the violence that you're engaging in. So what we do in the lab, I mean, it's technology, right? I mean, we're talking about technology in terms of social media and things like that, but this is the technology that I'm using. the realistic interactive game that I have created in particular, it differentiates between the retaliatory or reactive type of violence to this appetitive type of violence. Now we're saying that it's appetitive aggression because that's what's quantifiable in the lab. Obviously, we cannot replicate a violent scenario. We don't want people dying in the lab, obviously. So it is quantified using a physical punishment, which is unbearable. It's like it's almost like a realistic interactive, setup where you think it's real, but it's not. It's not real. It's hyper reality. So we use that. We use genetics, obviously, and there are some 40-odd genes that we look at in terms of their variability. And obviously, this is a variability of the genes linked to their behavioral traits that can predict some of the violent engagement. This is inherited, but at the same time, we want to say that this is not the only thing that can drive violence. And that's very important because some people can look at it as this eugenistic kind of research, which is not true. There are multiple factors, and there's a combination of all these factors that can come together. That's what drives this behavior, and genetics alone doesn't determine it. So there's psychiatry, and it's interesting in my research in particular that we rule out all major disorders like psychopathy, antisocial personality, schizophrenia, anxiety, depression, and everything else, mania, you name it. All of that gets rid, and then the subject comes and engages in this particular experiment that kind of makes sure that none of these mental health disorders are linked with this type of appetitive violence. Then obviously we use functional MRI. Our lab is primarily an MRI lab. We use functional MRI to see the functionality at the point of the behavior. So that identifies the brain regions linked with this type of violence. And then there's other types of neurophysiology, which is concurrent, such as the facial muscle activity, their eye gaze and attention, sweat release, pulse, and blood pressure. That's just to say how much of their sympathetic or parasympathetic systems engage during this action. And there is a difference between psychopaths who actually don't have sweat release at the time of violent crimes versus healthy individuals who do. Facial muscle activity, because you can actually see, not through your naked eyes, but through the electrodes attached to your face, whether this person is actually enjoying that action or not. And that is very important in extremist behavior because they are not sad to do what they're doing. I mean, you should look at the Christchurch shooter. He was actually enjoying it just like it was a real video game. Lastly, we use machine learning on this behavior and AI to derive some of the hypotheses and predictions. So here we've kind of finished the entire loop in this research in my lab, where we go from all the way from biological psychiatry to technology. So where it can be used, and this is my last thing. The second last thing. It's a technology for me. I mean, just to put it out there, it's like the ideology is a rider for extremists, right? And the research here in biology, it removes the ideology. Even in the absence of ideology, humans can engage in appetitive violence. So people who want to engage in this type of violence, they're just looking for an ideology to jump onto. It's merely used to justify this explosion of inherent biological, psychological, and social cauldron that they've got inside of them. Because cult hopping, it's very, very common in extremists, from white supremacists to jihadists. They go from one cult to another, so it's clear that an ideology or a single ideology is not the common driver for these people. And lastly, where and how this research can be used. It can be used on existing radicals and extremists to determine the potential risk of the prediction of violent crimes. I mean, I'm not sure how a lot of the different countries process this. I am sitting in Sweden, and I've got a lot of the back and forth between the US and some of the people here in Europe. They can also be used in convicted criminals of extremism to see how they've evolved through rehab or incarceration from the actual time of the violent crime. Have they actually gone through that period of rehabilitation, or are they still in the same frame of mind? A lot of the people go into the prison and come out to be more radicalized than they were previously. The guy who organized the white supremacy rally in Charlottesville, was actually radicalized in the prison itself. So it's very important to see how they are in the different
it's
different
19
places.
hours.
I'm sorry, that was my computer. In different places in their lives. And finally, it can potentially be used in target populations. So we can enable micro-focus on a subset of individuals that are mostly predicted for this type of crime, instead of focusing on the entire cohort, which is time-consuming, resource-consuming, and may lead to potential fallbacks. So that was my end of the research. And if you have any questions, we can talk about it later.
Thank you, Sumaiya. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.
Now, I would request Shiv Sahai to start. Shiv Sahai. Shiv, are you there? Shiv Sahai, please. Yeah, please welcome. I guess there has been still some confusion. Vimal Wakhlu ji, please start.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Aditya?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure being here and exchanging my thoughts with you. Actually, when I was asked to speak on this topic, my thoughts went back a few years when I had a serious discussion with one of my friends from the army, Major General Deva. I am a technology fan, and this gentleman warned me that there are going to be big challenges if these technologies are operational. And of course, he was not wrong. But today, I'll just quickly go through some of the things. I'll ultimately converge on what exactly we discussed. Here, there are some of the challenges facing developing nations, why I felt that leveraging technology is very important. But there are some security challenges faced by nations, and the challenges that the technologies themselves pose, as was mentioned by Mr. Raghavan, and also possible remedial measures and some conclusions. Developing nations face a lot of challenge. I have listed them here. There is little time. I can't discuss one by one. But just to mention, practically in every aspect, starting from food, air quality, right up to disaster preparedness, communication, security, health, education, everything. There are challenges faced by developing nations, including India. Now, the only way to mitigate these challenges are the use of technology, whether it's machine-to-machine, IoT, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, e-networks, GIS mapping, virtual and augmented reality, 3D printing, non-clonable ID, blockchain, big data analytics, drones, and the communication. And as we see that machine-to-machine and IoT practically covers most of the domains, whether it's air pollution, water management, agriculture, infrastructure monitoring, financial inclusion, and even in the health domain, smart ambulances, road safety, smart vehicles, and of course, energy sector, smart metering and smart grids. which are really important from country and city, smart city perspective. This also includes homeland security, the defense services, smart fences, borders, intrusion detection systems, and also further in the health domain, there are now even ingestible sensors. The patients can be remotely monitored, and even serious diseases like Parkinson's disease can be managed with that. There are GIS mapping where you can do satellite-based imagery, identification of resources, mapping of resources. These are important things, but there are challenges also, because once you have all this data, you are sitting on a bomb. Artificial intelligence, it has really transformed health domain in particular, with the fundus camera, diabetic retinopathy. The fundus camera with artificial intelligence, you can detect 15 diseases, including cancer. Then managing traffic, both air, road, it can be handled well with artificial intelligence. Managing resources in a city, machine learning also aids modern call centers, people with physical challenge, etc. And virtual reality and augmented reality, practically, it has revolutionized medical education and medical services in a big way. Yeah, there are a lot of things which can be managed with that. E-networks for health and education in particular, and we have used this for Pan-Africa also, for rural telemedicine, continued medical education, M-health and everything. In education, in a big way, right now also a lot of educational work is going on in this lockdown period on the virtual networks, and we are also holding webinars on platforms like Zoom and other things. They're also equally posing challenges also. 3D printing, practically in a country like India, which is known for jugaad, there are a lot of things that can happen. I'm quite excited about it, because even in the medical domain, dentistry, prosthetics, everything is happening on 3D printing, including printing of buildings now. Now, non-clonable ID, this is a trace and track, and this was used even in Delhi during the Commonwealth Games in 2010 for prevention of suicide attacks on the venues. There are a lot of other things which we can do with these. Blockchain, of course, with a feature like hyper-register, complete transparency, etc. is maintained. And drones for maintenance of law and order, it has been recently also used in Delhi. And medical aid in remote areas, there is a huge potential with defibs, blood samples, supply of essential medicines, and of course, for agriculture and disaster management as well. So big data analytics, as other speakers have also pointed out, it is a big role to play in safety and security of the cities, the countries, from terrorism, lynchings, and other, even for monitoring other schemes. And communication network, we have seen during this lockdown period how useful this connectivity is, and how throughput and high throughput matters for even dissemination of content. And social media, which is like a sharp knife, I would say. It works both ways. Now, the security challenges that the countries are faced with, there are non-state actors, so-called, like the ISIS. And of course, there are a lot of things that can be said, what motivates them. And there are countries with terrorism as a part of their defense strategy. And we as a country are facing that. Then there is a third dimension, which I should have added here. There are friends of such countries also. So the world is not divided into strictly, normal countries and only terrorists. There is a gray shade also here. There are religious fanatics. And of course, in the modern warfare tactics, the use of less conventional weapons is going to be there. There are rogue nations. and nations with a facade also. And most of these also have advanced artificial intelligence. They have really advanced to crack all codes in the world. Nothing is safe that way. And later part of this century, no need for terrorists to use conventional weaponry, no AK-47s now. There are many other things that can be done. And I mentioned about my friend General Deva, he's of course no more now. So he used to mention that the whole defense system can be brought down to on its knees, because all the modern weaponry is computer controlled, remote controlled, and AI can crack all the codes, and hacking can render the whole defense system ineffective. So without firing a bullet, a country can come down on its knees. Power, smart grids can be hacked, shut down in no time, and it can lead to a total chaos in the country. Smart cities, there are 100 of them in the country. They can be sabotaged and shut down literally. And health services, there can be stealing, manipulation of individual health records, which can be used for terrorist purposes. And patients can be administered wrong doses of medicine deliberately. As I mentioned earlier, there is a provision for using IoT for medicine, administration. The same technique can be misused as well. Financial transactions, other speakers have talked about it. The whole financial system can be pulled down, creating chaos in the country. Terror financing, which, it leverages the existing system. Agriculture, smart agriculture, which can be aided by IoT, can also be converted into a disaster for targeting a nation. And with the manipulation of sensors, disasters, creation of man-made disasters. And homeland security also is a challenge when it comes to the use of these technologies by the terrorists and their masters. Breach on informatics, paralyzing police networks in affected areas. Nothing can happen. There'll be helplessness. Use of drones. We have seen recently, even in India and Punjab, low-flying drones, which the radars cannot detect, drop weapons. And they are capable of they can have payloads of nuclear, biological, and chemical, material. And they also in the espionage. Now, besides this, there is a big challenge in terms of radicalization of the youth in the name of religion, cult, and use of social media. Misinformation war, spreading lies, the same technologies can be misused, creating chaos, confusion, and AI is already being used for data analytics for misuse of the vulnerable. And biowarfare, use of suicide bombers, and maybe coronavirus is another thing which leaves lot of explaining to be done by many people, and it looks like somewhere close to what it is. Control over the internet. It's the possible remedial measures which as I mentioned, as army man and myself, we discussed that the best solution is control over the internet. Root servers need to be in the country, because whatever may happen, nobody is anybody's friend when it comes to warfare. Even US did not support India during the Kargil conflict. The GPS locations were not revealed for obvious reasons. So war is a war. And use of intranets can be in the critical areas like defense and smart grids. Intranets could be thought about. Big data analytics for tracking unusual activities on the financial portals, and also tracking other activities and finding correlations. This is one major tool against such challenges. And educating public in a big way would also help. Besides this, developing a mechanism to trace and track low-flying drones, which still doesn't seem to have happened, is going to be a major thing in the war against terrorism. And regulation on the social media. There have to be cyber warriors who have to be on the trawl to see whether any misinformation is being spread, and they have to counter it. And sharing of information among friendly nations can happen. Now, countries like India are quite vulnerable to terrorism and pandemics. A challenge posed where technology can be met by leveraging on the technology itself. The terror outfits have succeeded so far because they're always ahead of the threats. We cannot catch up with them under normal conditions. We have to somehow beat them at their own game, and here also technology can help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wakhlu. Thanks for a lovely presentation. I would now request Rand Waltzman. Welcome, Rand.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Voice is cracking, sir.
It's cracking. Can you hear me better now? That's the best I've got.
Yeah, better.
Yeah, that's better. Okay. Well, I would just like to add a few things after what everybody said. And, you know, part of the problem is everybody's focused on terrorists, but terrorists aren't even necessarily the biggest problem. I mean, any kind of technology that you develop can be used for good or bad purposes by just about, and is used for good and bad purposes by just about anybody. That includes criminal elements, that includes politicians, people from various political parties all over the world. This technology has fallen into the hands of everybody. And when you set up networks, like has been discussed earlier, for sharing technology and you know, expertise and ideas, these networks will be penetrated by bad people. There's no question about it. And when I say penetrated, I don't mean hacking the networks. I mean actually actively participating in the way that they're supposed to be participated in. They will be there to learn. They will be there to observe. And they're, you know, people you need to start thinking about how is it that you're going to mitigate these kinds of problems. It's not enough just to say, oh, well, we're going to have this network and everything's going to be hunky-dory. No, I'm sorry, that's not how it works. And this has been repeatedly shown throughout history, and there's no reason to believe anything will change. And for those in research, like we were just chatting with Sumaiya, who are worried about their results being used for bad purposes, well, guess what? That's going to happen no matter what you do. And you can just, you know that's going to happen. And there's very little way to control that. The question is, how do you mitigate the use of such things? You need to focus on mitigation techniques. And finally, let's see, what do I say more? Yeah, I think that's really the basic problem. It's technology. Oh, the other thing is democratization of technology. Stuff today is cheap. Everything is cheap. Using social media is cheap. You don't need nation states. You don't need major terrorist organizations. You don't need major organizations of any kind. I mean, two guys in a garage can wreak an enormous amount of damage through social media and information environment. So you have what I would call a democratization of weapons of mass destruction. And this is a fact of life. And there really any controls that you can impose on the distribution of technology, there's actually no real way. It's a conceit that never really works. It's not like the days we had nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons, okay, nuclear weapons are really expensive and they're really hard to use and they require major investments up front. But the things that are coming online today and over the last years and coming in the future, they're not expensive to be used very effectively. And you need to explicitly take that into account. So I just leave you with those few thoughts.
Thanks, Rand. Now I would request Shiv again if he's there. Shiv? I would request Shiv Sahai if he's able to. Shiv sir, if we can have you on the. Shiv Sahai, please. Well, we can then start with our Q&A round. The question is from Anupama Sharan. She says, we need to develop and strengthen our counterterrorism communication and propaganda, which is more powerful and effective than those used by the terror networks. What are the concrete intergovernmental measures that are being implemented as of now? So this question is for Major General BIPIN BAKSHI. General BAKSHI, please.
Yeah, I'm just coming on. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question is more about counter propaganda. I mean, as she's mentioning, the way activities, the government activities to counter this is not really happening at the same pace. So we are always playing catch up, it appears. The action has happened, and then we are trying to bolt the stable door after the horse is already gone. This is changing. We cannot do this by the government alone. It has to be a collaboration between the governments and the social media companies. So I would say there has to be a more engaging partnership in this. Because what I have seen so far is that the governments are just wanting to throw the book on the social media company. The social media company on its part says, look, I'm just a medium. I'm not creating wrong content. And if there are 1 million posts in an hour, it is, really not physically possible for me to validate each and every post in the time frame which it is happening. So either we say that all these platforms have to be administered, that is, nothing can go live. You filter it first, see if it has got some extremist content, and only then you permit it to go up. But that involves, curbing of freedom. So it's a moot question. Work is on it. I have a little experience of it, but I am not the best person to answer it. Maybe somebody else on the panel can also speak about the governmental efforts to prevent violent extremist propaganda. Thank you.
Dr. Kalsi.
This is Rand. I would at least tell you that in the United States, the government is doing basically nothing. Not only is it doing nothing at the moment, but it isn't likely to be doing anything in the future. And there are lots of reasons, and it's very complicated why that's the case, but it comes down to laws about privacy, about policies, and then in general cowardice. Because the problem is that since all politicians, for example, all businesses use the same tools and techniques to spread whatever they want, they're not likely to close down that kind of operation. So, yeah, here it is not happening. And in Europe, as far as I know, it isn't really happening either for similar reasons. So, and besides that, I would just add that relying on companies to solve this problem is a total non-starter. Because first of all, companies, they're a business. They're not, Mark Zuckerberg is not a public servant. He is not an elected official. And he doesn't have to actually care about anything that anybody thinks as long as he's making, as long as business is good. And besides that, even if you look at what the platforms are doing today, you can't actually look at what they're doing today. You can only hear what they say they're doing. But there's actually no way to go in and verify what it is they're doing. So personally, I don't believe anything that they're saying. I have no reason to believe it. They won't allow anybody to actually have a look. For example, if you go to them and say, well, would you allow an auditor, an independent third-party auditor, to go in and look at your operations to at least verify that you do what you say? Just like a financial auditor goes into a company, and the results of the financial audit are to say that the company's public financial statement is an accurate representation of the finances of the company. Not good or bad, but it's accurate. And so I would have an auditor go in to Facebook and say, and come out and say, yes, they actually do what they claim they're doing. I mean, that would be a start. But in the meantime, I don't see any chance of that happening. So I'll get off.
Dr. Kalsi, if you can take it further. Dr. Kalsi. Yeah.
The basic problem is that the government is not able to create the counter narrative to whatever propaganda is going on. So the best way to resolve or to tackle such kind of problems is that the government will have to establish their cells or involve the private sector in a manner, or NGOs in a manner that will create counter narratives. And then these counter narratives, they have to go out in the social media, and they have to counter the arguments put forward by the terrorist groups. So to some extent, we have tried this in some of the states, and we have been very successful. And I think nowadays it is happening quite a bit, and it is being done very, very successfully. And more needs to be done on this. So when I was there in MHA, we tried to establish a cell. So thereafter I left, and I now understand that a proper cell has been put in place in MHA for this purpose.
Thank you, Dr. Kalsi. Well, we have a question from Colonel Sanjeev Relia. Bitcoins have become the easiest way of payment by the terrorists for their then purchases they make on the dark web and deep web. So what, according to you, the dark web is being extensively used by terrorists for purchase of weapons and explosives because of the routing technologies being used by the dark web. The delivery path can never be traced. So what you say, as per you, sir? What exactly you suggest? What exactly you say? Dr. Raghavan, and then Dr. Kalsi.
Well, it's not today. It has been there. The Bitcoin has been there for quite some time. At least I'm aware of for the last 10 to 15 years. While Bitcoin has been the instrument of exchanging products as well as vital information, it has benefited. It has benefited both sides. That is, both the government as well as the guys who are the suppliers, the bad guys. Okay, so I don't know whether to stop Bitcoins or to legislate an action. We should look at it in a very holistic way. That is, what is the alternate mode of dealing with information that are floating, around in the dark web. And mind you, these are all informations which, depending on depending on the value, you know how important they are. And then another important thing is, it is a misnomer to say that if you have Bitcoins, you can get any information that you want. See, the dark web operates in a totally different way. It doesn't operate in the manner which we presume. Oh, I can get anything that I want from the dark web. No, the dark web respects. See, their strength only respects strength. So, dark web, the person who's holding such an important information has to be convinced that you are as good a resource as he is, and he can depend on you in terms of any requirements. Only then very vital informations are available in the dark web, and of course through payment, and nothing goes without a payment. So therefore, I'm not in a position to say whether we should ban the Bitcoin or not. From the simple perspective of counterterrorism, I'm not talking getting into the economics or the currency management aspect of the Bitcoin. Thank you.
I think the Bitcoin is going to be there forever now. And you can expect that by 2027, 10% of the world GDP is going to be in Bitcoins. So it's a reality. It has been recognized as a currency by many of the countries, including our own RBI. So the answer to the question is that you have to really tackle the bad guys when they get their supplies. You cannot do anything about the dark web. And let me also share that if you really look at the dark web and the deep web put together, they constitute 96% of the total internet space. Only 4% is the surface which is visible to you. So you have to deal with this 96% because this is something where you cannot really have you have really no control. So you have to really catch hold of the bad guys when they actually get on to doing things. Not possible to trace them out through bitcoins or through any such other means. The other way to tackle these guys is that you become a ploy, you become a decoy as a customer, and then you try and approach these guys, and then you try and crack some of these the deep web and dark web sellers. So that has been done in some cases, but not with much success. So I think this is going to stay. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Kalsi. Now we have a question from Saurabh Srivastava. He says, what are the cybersecurity policies and who are drafting in this time of pandemic to protect our important national industrial assets? Presently, most of our industrial assets do not have homogeneous solutions on their OT side. Sir, it's the floor is fully open. So, answer.
Well, information infrastructure protection policy, which comes into operation for such kind of situations, and this policy is controlled by the NTRO. So NTRO is responsible for the critical information infrastructure. So if you really look at the critical infrastructure, there are about 18 sectors which are extremely important. And out of these, most of these sectors are now being governed through the information age, through the use of internet. So most of them can be controlled through the internet, and therefore they come in the ambit of the policy framed by the NTR. This is a proper policy, and the document has been circulated, and it's being followed by most sectors. Then there are sectoral certs in each case, and these sectoral certs, they have their own policies, and those policies are also being implemented by each one of them. Thank you.
May I add to that? What has been just said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Dr. Kalsi is right. Initially, it was the NTRO which was given the task to raise an organization called the NCIIPC, that is the National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center. But actually, the NCIIPC is not supposed to be with the NTRO. It is emerging to be a separate entity. We have an appointment. I wish Mr. Sahai was here. It appears he's the ADG in the NSCS. So within the National Security Council Secretariat, there is an appointment called the National Cyber Security Coordinator, which earlier was Mr. Gulshan Rai, and today it is Lieutenant General Pant. So this entire organization is taking root. They have an office. They have set up something called a Security Operational Center, which is near Connaught Place. And ultimately, it is going to go through with some element with the NTRO and some element with the CERT-IN. We also have an organization called the CERT-IN, Computer Emergency Response Team India. So a combination of all these things are coming about, and it is being headed, as I mentioned, in the NSCS, so it will be with the NSA. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we have a question from Sam. The question is for Sumaiya. Humans are psychologically more receptive to sensationalism and escapism, and that has been exploited by the bad actors and unscrupulous opportunist politicians. Social media is the tool. So what exactly you suggest?
Sorry, I did not get your question again, Aditya.
Humans are psychologically more receptive to sensationalism and escapism, and that has been exploited by the bad actors and unscrupulous opportunist politicians. So what exactly you suggest? How does it all come?
Well, that's true. I mean, we can see how the news kind of develops these days. There is sensationalism everywhere. A little bit is kind of, elaborated into something that isn't actually realistic. Having said that, in times of these, specifically when we're talking about COVID, not just COVID-19, but also the topic of our conversation, extremism, but also with COVID-19, I think it's very important to stick to evidence-based policies in particular, not just in science and medicine, but even outside of it. And if countries stop relying on research and evidence-based policies, only then there should be a top-down approach where evidence and research is being presented as the sole gold standard to inform policies. And if we don't do that, then the news will just stick to something that we have right now in the pandemic. It's full with misinformation. It's how things have become, even drugs that we don't think has any evidence in research have been used all across the world now to solve problems. WhatsApp, of course, is one of the worst candidates here, but everywhere else, Mr. Trump goes on and says things like these particular drugs have been known to work where they haven't. So I think it should be a top-down approach. The leaders and the government need to step up and use evidence and research instead of relying on hearsay. So it's the human tendency, of course, but the better of us should take over.
Now I would request Krishan Varma sir to take it forward. Krishan Varma sir, please take it forward, sir. In the meantime, we have a question from Anupama Sharan again. She says, with highly evolved technology, can we not stop the union of pandemics and terrorism? Naming and shaming the covert actors like China and Pakistan and everything is important. The question is for General BIPIN BAKSHI and then Dr. Vijayraghavan.
Sorry. Yeah, obviously the question is hinting at holding China to account for this particular pandemic. As you may be aware, Germany has already raised a health bill of about 135 million
Billion.
euros on China.
Billion euros.
Sorry, billion euros on China. So where that will move ultimately, and we're also aware that certain people in the US have also raised a voice that we need to hold China accountable for what this is. But this is going to polarize the world even further. So we have to see where this really goes, and whether China will, just own up to it, and to think that they will pay for this kind of damages is very difficult to imagine. So I'll pass on this to the next person, please.
Dr. Raghavan, and then over to Krishan Varma, sir.
Now, can you repeat that question again? Because one is about holding China. What's the other one?
Just a moment. With highly evolved technology, can we not stop the union of pandemics and terrorism? Naming and shaming the covert actors like China is very important.
Okay. So as far as naming and shaming and all that, I think General has adequately answered. And as well as stopping the pandemics or stopping this one,
yes, sir.
I don't think that is possible at all, because every human development comes with a pair of counter development. Okay, so therefore, it's we call it in Hinduism devas and asuras. So as long as there are devas, there are going to be asuras and converse. So therefore, if not today, sometime in the future, you may be able to contain it, but something else will come. And so essentially, it's a question of shifting the goalpost eternally. So I don't think it is possible. It's my view.
Right, then we will start with now the third round for the comments. So now I will start with Professor John Nomikos, please. John Nomikos. I guess John is out. So we will let's go for Vimal Wakhlu, please. Vimal Wakhlu ji.
I just wanted some reaction from Dr. Nirmaljeet Singh Kalsi on the GTCP, which he has proposed, the Global Technology Collaboration Platform. Actually, it's like this, that in the deep net, this already exists. This terrorism as a service, it already exists. They are making full use of it. You pay money and you get a job done. So, and as you mentioned, 96% of all usage is in the dark net, and it's 4% over here. So, will this type of collaboration really sort of be able to offset the challenge of the terrorists?
You have a choice of either doing something or doing nothing. So it's up to you.
No, that's fine. I agree. But, if we sort of have a platform wherein, yes, only people who are above board are able to participate, but below us, there is a big, you can say, mountain of darknet, which we are not able to tackle. So will we be really able to solve the problem? Otherwise, it's a wonderful concept.
See, it's the question of collaboration. Unless you have a collaborative platform, you will not be able to even match them. You won't even try. And in case you are able to establish this kind of a platform, then God willing, you will be able to strengthen this platform with use of technologies, especially the uh, neural networks and AI and kind of data you are holding. And then eventually you'll be able to win over them. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, that's true. But they also use AI and other things. And in some cases, they have the support of even some states.
Then
I mean,
let's get back and
they
just
are
let them do
non-state
whatever they
actors for
want to do.
them, but they are actively involved in this. Some of the states.
Absolutely. But then they are not as organized as this platform is going to be.
No, but my fear is that if it's for all people on this planet, all countries, an open platform for collaboration, I mean, they can work both ways. I mean, up and down in the dark net as well as our net, and even sort of sabotage our work.
Surely, but you'll have to set rules for that. Just a concept.
Okay.
Sir, I personally have a question. Can I get a data set for social networks such as Twitter or Facebook to discover fraud?
See, when you work with the... Okay, Mr. Raghavan wants to say something.
Dr. Raghu? Yeah.
No, so, there are two things. One is I'm in support of what Dr. Kalsi was telling. See, it is not either this or that. The thing is, it is your smartness that also counts, which we are not discussing. The smartness lays in the manner in which we utilize the other resources which are there in the dark web or the deep web. See, just like the FBI uses or NSA of the United States use the darknet, the amount of usage of darknet by the NSA is mind-boggling, right? So, I mean, it's something like globalization. You make everybody work for you, including bad guys, in which case you are one step ahead. So it is not the question of either this or that. And what's the next question, which it was passed on to me, Dr. Kalsi?
He was saying that
I was saying, can I get a data set for a social network such as Twitter or Facebook to discover fraud?
See, I would split the answer into two parts, a technical part and the operational part. Technical part, yes, no problem. Any data set we can manipulate using analytics. And of course, it depends on the analytics and you get what you want. As far as the operational thing is concerned, you have privacy, you have this, you have human rights, you have whatnot. That's what I referred to in the beginning. You have certain boundaries. It's in which the organizations like government has to operate, right? So when you factor in those, the answer, in my opinion, is an emphatic no.
Okay. Okay, sir. I would now request the closing comments, please. Then we will start with Dr. Kalsi.
Do you need any more comments?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I think the number of ideas have come up, and now we need to sit down and take it forward. I'm sure the Secretariat would work on the recommendations made or the discussions held, and come up with some kind of action points on these, which can then be taken forward. So I'm really thankful to the forum for giving me this chance to share my views and discuss such an important topic. And I'm sure that something can be done about it. If we move forward, definitely we will be able to add value to this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. General Bipin Bakshi, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to dwell upon two things which emerged today. The first one is this wonderful idea which Dr. Kalsi has mentioned about a global technological cooperation platform. I'd like to say that start by having it at the national level at least. So I'll give my experience that we have an organization like the DRDO. Now, while they have been for many years working only towards the conventional weapons, they have actually now started making equipment for the police also. So while I was in the NSG, one of the DRDO officers actually came over and was trying to understand as to how defense research and development organization can work for the police or the NSG. In the meantime, the army has gone and having an army ATB Army Technology Board, wherein the army and the IITs have collaborated. And the army is asking the IIT to make weapons for them or to make equipment for them. So in this manner, there are a number of bilateral platforms which are moving in this space, but they have not been congregated. So forget about the global level. We are not even integrated at the national level. Let us first make a platform where we can integrate so many things. Like in this COVID battle, there is an army officer in Pune. He has designed a ventilator which can be made for 10,000 rupees. And there's a small video floating around how he's made it. It's a very simple mechanical device where he's able to do the ventilator action on that balloon with just about less than 10,000 rupees. Now that again has been standalone. So we need to first integrate at the national level. That is one. The second issue is, which was being talked about, the countering the narrative. Now I have attended a couple of these Facebook seminars and other issues. Facebook has actually got a program going, and they have an appointment called CVE, that is Counter Violent Extremism Desk in their own system. While there was somebody who was mentioning that he really doubts that Facebook is doing anything. So whatever I have seen, well, they were trying. But in the course of all this, I was earlier handling the public relations of Northern Point J&K. Giving out a counter narrative may not really work. In fact, there was one international researcher who said that there is no proven data to say that a counter narrative has ever worked anywhere in the world. What is better is to just give the truth. Now, what is happening is that the government has its own systems. We are not able to give the truth in time. Or when we do give it, we give half truth. Or we hold back something. And we say we are checking. If you just give the truth out front, you're more likely to defeat the fake news or the wrong propaganda. So we need to learn how to handle the social media and the media space and the print and the electronic media space by just giving the truth up front and fast. And we're not able to do it. So once we learn to do that, the amount of the bite of the fake news will be taken away. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sir, we have our moderator with us back. Comments from him means a lot. So I would request Krishan Varma sir to please make comments, and then we proceed with others. Krishan Varma sir, please.
Thank you very much. Sorry if it's been playing a bit of monkey with me, Sectt today. But let me first, at the outset, commend the speakers. I think each one of them, starting with Mr. General BAKSHI and then Mr. Vijayraghavan and Mr. Kalsi, was simply outstanding. Some of them I missed, so I couldn't really compliment them. Sumaiya Shaikh I heard a bit of, which was bringing a completely new facet and a new angle to the entire issue of counter-terrorism. So that also was very useful. But I personally like the idea that Mr. Kalsi had expounded regarding this GTCP. I think it's a fantastic and a very phenomenal kind of idea which needs to be taken up. The other point that was made during the course of conversation was on the use of a public and private partnership. I think the problem is so huge, so gigantic, that only a collaborative, and I think this point was made repeatedly by Mr. Kalsi, the only way to fight this is not to be able to do it alone, but to do a collaborative effort, which should be, at least in the beginning, completely national. But we'll have to work out with allies, with other countries who are in the same, either in the same basket as we are, or at least see the same specter of threat that the web actually poses to us, especially from terrorism and all the facets of terrorism. Whether we are looking at terrorist financing, we are looking at terrorist funding, we are looking at recruitment, radicalization, we are looking at the online payments, we are looking at credit theft, credit card theft, we are looking at identity theft, we are looking at some big cyber frauds, cyber crimes, hacking. I think Mr. Kalsi had brought out a beautiful paper, and I'm glad I was on the net at that point of time. I think it was a very comprehensive roadmap, literally, as to how to go forward. So I think there is a lot to take away from this meeting, and I think Aditya, you have a very, very good network, or at least a roadmap that you could sort of work out, and I put these things into perspective. I think Mr. Vijayraghavan's inputs also came in from a very mature and a very old and a practitioner's point of view, which again I think was invaluable. And so was General BAKSHI's, who actually is also a practitioner and is actually current. So that makes a difference. I think there is a very good mix and a very healthy mix of ideas, of theory, of practical ways to go. The question is, do we have the will, do we have the bandwidth, do we have the capacity, and do we have the willingness to do a collaborative effort, or are we still going to be stuck in turf wars? And I think this is one of the biggest issues that has been, at least through my service career, I found that whenever you're going forward, there are jostlings within the system. And somehow or the other, we all sort of capitulate to pressures and to different elements that come into play, which sometimes thwart all your efforts. I think the time has come to really unitedly take this up, and I think the pandemic itself gives us a very good idea as to how we have to collaborate. And look at the way people have been using it. I mean, something like ISIS and Al-Qaeda talking about, this is Allah's retribution, and we will eventually surmount and overwhelm the white man, because this guy is a degenerate and his morality is low and his hygiene is poor. But things like that, these narratives have to be countered. I think we also have to probably see how we find a role for ourselves, how we can get a collaborative kind of a relationship going between the US and the China, which are beginning to now come up into a, it's like a head-to-head on the AI, robotics, and machine learning planes. I think they're developing their own thing, and the Chinese are with their own OS and now chipsets coming in. I think that's another specter that we are going to face, and how they are going to proceed further in this is something that sometimes you shudder to see the magnitude of the problem that we are facing, and are we really prepared? I think all the gentlemen here on the panel, I think, have contributed on their own very, very big ways. From what I have learned, and I have sort of watched them while I was in service, we were sort of living a life more of anonymity than out there in front. But we are aware of the kind of work that has gone in. I hope this will be harnessed. I hope all of you are really used in this system, because I think every bit of that information that was exchanged today is of extreme value. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, dear moderator. My last question, if it is okay with the speakers, that what sort of methods are used by the authorities to monitor the terrorist internet activity? If someone can take up.
Are we talking about international level or the domestic?
Sir, global cooperation. I mean, yes, international.
Aditya, nobody will open their mouth.
International, I think there are a lot of things we can learn from Israel, who have an effective network in place and a proper big data analytics platform, where in every movement and counter movement is tracked, and that is the way to take it forward. Thank you.
The question, I think, Mr. Wakhlu, I'm sorry I didn't mention you when I was making those remarks. I should have. I apologize. I think the other problem that is coming up is privacy. And, even now with a lot of applications that are being put on for various issues, which the Israelis have used to great advantage, have been criticized by many democracies as being very intrusive. And I think this is the kind of debate the evil guys have used to be able to find more and more vulnerabilities to exploit and get into these systems. They are hacking, they're constantly attacking our systems. They are actually, there's a lot of compromise of data that is happening. I think one of the biggest pitfalls I find, at least in our system, is the fact that your data doesn't reside on your own servers internally. You don't have any controls. It's going out. And what is happening with it? Who's exchanging what at what price? I mean, this is gold. This is platinum. I think it's one of the richest elements or resource that one can actually possess. So I think there needs to be a relook at the entire gamut of how we. Even though there's a lot of work being done, I think we need to sort of brains like yourselves have to get together and put your head back into it and see how we can do it. Who can we collaborate with? I think basically that it is I don't think there's an escape from public-private partnership in this. We have to bring in the big boys in the private sector to collaborate very closely with the government and try and find out ways and means to neutralize this. After all, these are private individuals sitting outside in Google and Microsoft and Apple and Amazon who are actually running these things. They're running these platforms and they know how to actually find out what's going on at every given time. Do we need to replicate that, or do we need to partner that? I don't know. That the jury's out on that. But I think it has to be majorly an indigenous effort with little collaboration from the others, because I think sovereignty plays a role. But then the way the cyber space is, there's seamless. There's no borders for this. It goes across everywhere, wherever. So I don't know really where to start. I'm at a loss myself, but I would leave it to you, expert.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I think the government is waking up to this reality. And now today in the paper, I read that government is going to fund platform which will be equivalent of Zoom here. I mean, they are going to give awards to people initially for 10 and then 3 and then maybe choose the best platform. I mean, that's a good way to start, because then the data will be resident here. I mean, the type of challenges that we have faced with the Zoom will not be there. I think this is how we should take each step and have our own systems. That's the only way to move forward.
Absolutely. And unionization is, I think, is the key word here.
I had a long discussion with the Secretary IT day before, and we have decided to identify 10 technologies where we need Indian systems. Counterpart of Zoom is one of them. So I would suggest, I would rather request this platform to suggest these technologies which can be taken up. Secondly, what I've suggested to him is that instead of choosing just one company in the end, they must choose 3 best. And then these 3 best companies must form some kind of a joint venture with small government stake, so that the government can have the strategic control. Because ultimately, if these technologies are going to be majorly used by the government, they must have some kind of a control. So he has also agreed to look at that. But I would request all members to give us those 10 technologies which the government of India should put in their effort to develop those technologies indigenously. Thank you.
I think what Mr. Kalsi you're saying, I think I completely agree with that. We have the strategic partnership concept in the area of defense. perhaps you should be looking at this even in this particular area. You know,
Right.
you think of the problem and you get in 2 or 3 major players from the private sector who are known and they're patriotic, they are trustworthy, and you can work with them along with some key elements in the government and sit down and make a separate cell and actually come out with solutions. And they will come up with even their own OS, and then you can get even to chipset. You can do a whole thing on your own. Why does the Americans and the Chinese be the only ones who do this? Why can't the Indians get into it? After all, it's Indian brain working, at least in the US, to be able to produce all this. We should be able to harness that capacity and that capability within our country. I think somebody like you people, Mr. Raghavan, you, Mr. Akla, should be actually taking the lead role in this. That's at least my recommendation to this.
So
Right.
just to add to it, I mean, GCTC is a very good team, and maybe we can start and deliver our proposal. Maybe we have the best of the experts.
Yes, I think so.
Yes, sir.
I think what has come out from this meeting has been absolutely gold, if you ask me. And I thank Aditya. Thank you for sort of bringing this in. And at this very, very opportune time when we are really facing a huge, challenge from the terrorism as well as from pandemics, it's really the need of the hour.
So, well, thank you so much to all the esteemed speakers and the moderator. To start with, I will thank General BIPIN BAKSHI, then Dr. Nirmaljeet and Kalsi, then Professor John Nomikos. I would also like to thank Dr. Sumaiya, then Dr. MS Vijayraghavan, Mr. Wakhlu, Shiv M Sahai. I mean, I'm sorry we can't hear his comments, and last but not the least, our audience. Because of them, I mean, we got a lot of good questions, and thank you all once again. And I would request once again that yes, on the coming Thursday and Saturday, we are coming up with Afghan peace process, discussion on Afghan peace process. It will be one of its kind, wherein we will be having speakers from Afghanistan regime, from Taliban. We also would be having on Saturday with Indo-Pak relations post-COVID. So it's a nice initiative the GCTC collectively GCTC members have thought of. So we hope something really concrete comes out on every GCTC Manthan episode. Thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you and good night.
Good. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you all. Bye.